Welcome to Mystery Cafe, your ultimate stop for gripping detective stories, chilling mysteries, and unforgettable investigations. Here, every video serves a fresh dose of suspense, shocking twists, and cases that challenge your inner detective. From classic whodunits to modern crime stories, we bring the world of mystery straight to your screen, where every clue matters and no secret stays buried for long. Before we start unraveling today's mystery, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa. Drop your country, city, or stay in the comments, and let's see how far the Mystery Cafe family reaches. Magnifying glass tilted right.
Allan Pinkerton and the Murder in Ashdown Square. Chapter 1: The House in Ashdown Square. There are corners of London where the fog rolls in not as menace, but as privilege. Ashdown Square was one of them. That evening, the mist clung to the tall lamps and brick facades like a gentleman's overcoat, expensive, well-kept, and yet carrying a quiet weight of unease. I had come to number 17 at the request of Lady Margaret Finch, wife to Sir Alastair Finch, an industrialist whose fortune in metals kept half the Admiralty running. A housemaid, tight-lipped and red-eyed, brought me through a hall where every banister gleamed with polish and every carpet was heavy with silence. There was grief here, but also something else, a nervous restraint, as though the house wished to keep its own counsel. Lady Margaret received me in the morning room, pale and composed, though her hands trembled when she pressed a lace handkerchief to her lips. "Mr. Pinkerton," she said, "I am told that you succeed where the police grow uncertain. That is why I wrote you. A young woman in our service is dead. Jane Grey, my son's nurse companion. They found her yesterday in the basement, with Sir Alastair's revolver beside her. The police are ready to call it suicide. But her voice faltered. I cannot believe it." Her words struck harder than she knew. I had read the morning's newspapers, a few suggestive lines, half-facts buried beneath society gossip. But to hear it spoken by the mistress herself, it gave the story an uglier depth. "Who attended her first?" I asked. "Our physician, Dr. Lionel Tempest," she said. "He urged that embalming be carried out at once, to spare us indignity. I am told since that this was irregular." "Irregular, yes. Dangerous too. Embalming erases traces, the kind that speak louder than witnesses. I made a note of it." Lady Margaret gathered herself. "My husband will see you shortly. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bright, our housekeeper, will take you to the basement." The descent smelled of coal dust and beeswax polish. Mrs. Bright led with a brass lamp, her face drawn. "We've kept things as they were, Mr. Pinkerton. Police said little should be touched. The cellar spread wide and whitewashed, its floor flagged, a great copper for laundry looming in one corner. On the stone lay the chalk outline of a woman. Beside it, a smear darkened the floor where the revolver had been. "Who found her?" I asked. "Allan, the chauffeur. He came for coal, screamed, and fetched me. Dr. Tempest arrived within minutes." "The revolver," she hesitated. "It was Sir Alastair's. Locked in his study desk. He always said the key never left his person." I crouched near the outline, running my fingers across the flagged stone. A revolver in a locked drawer, yet lying at a dead girl's hand. Locks, in my experience, tell lies as often as men do. "And a note?" "None," she whispered. "The doctor said she was hysterical. Unhappy. But I never saw it. I studied the stairway. A faint smear clung to the polished banister. Candle soot. Strange place for it. Strange, too, that someone had polished so diligently after death had passed through. When I met Sir Alistair in his study, the man was tall, lean, and defensive. The room reeked of ledgers and controlled tempers. "I have told the police everything," he snapped before I had settled. "The girl's death is a tragedy, but there was no scandal here. If you've come to imply otherwise, you waste your time." "I've come for truth," I said evenly. "Allow me 3 questions, Sir Alistair. Who had access to the revolver? Who pressed for embalming at once? And why does soot lie on the polished banister where no candle need have been?" His face hardened. "The revolver was mine alone. The doctor advised embalming, for my wife's sake." "And the soot?" "Good heavens, man, this is a household, not a laboratory. We light candles in fog." I let his answers rest, though they rang hollow. He wanted this over quickly. But houses speak, if you listen: a smear of wax, a drawer too easily opened, stairs too freshly polished. Evidence doesn't lie, only people do. And in this house, someone had lied already. Chapter 2: The Haste of Dr. Tempest. Dr. Lionel Tempest received me in his Brook Street surgery. The brass plate on the door announced his skill in female nerves and general debility. That kind of self-advertising always makes me cautious. In my line of work, the louder a man proclaims his virtue, the closer I watch his hands. He was well-groomed, smooth in speech, the kind of physician who could charm a drawing room. "Most distressing, Mr. Pinkerton," he began before I had Saturday. "Tragic creatures like Miss Grey are too fragile for the world." I advised Sir Alistair to spare his household vulgar curiosity. Embalming at once seemed the kindest course. Kindness is one word. Cover-up is another. "Doctor," I said, "you know as well as I do that embalming can obscure bruises, the timing of a bullet, the lividity of the blood. Evidence erased before the coroner can see it." His eyes flashed, just for a moment, but his voice stayed calm. "Surely you don't suggest my promptness interfered with justice?" Miss Grey had headaches, faint spells. Nothing unusual for a nurse overworked in a house full of nerves. That was too neat for my taste. Neatness, in my experience, is the sworn enemy of truth. I asked, "And Lady Margaret? How was she toward the girl?" "I have attended the Finches 10 years, he said smoothly. "I serve the whole household." I left with little more than I'd brought in, except a firmer conviction that the doctor's tidy story was meant to close a door I intended to pry open. At the coroner's office, a clerk with chalk dust on his sleeves gave me what I needed. Yes, there would be an inquest. Yes, the embalming had been most irregular. No note was found. The revolver, a .32 caliber, had been freshly oiled, wiped of useful prints. Wound at the right temple. Miss Grey was said to be right-handed. Too much procedure, too little sense. By evening, I returned to Ashdown Square and asked to see Miss Lydia Thompson, Sir Alistair's secretary. She sat in the library at a small desk beneath a tall clock, neat in her typing, neat in her answers. Slim woman, spectacles, soft face made hard by habit. "Tell me about Miss Grey," I said. She was discreet, kind to the child, and moved quietly, Thompson replied. She made others confide in her but kept her own counsel. Still, she admitted once to me that she had been receiving letters. They upset her. Letters from whom? She colored faintly. Possibly a man. She never said. The day before her death she told me she would not be made a fool of. She burned those letters in the library grate. I watched her feed them into the fire one by one. That much detail I never take at face value. Too rehearsed. Too careful. I asked for a sample of her handwriting. Write for me the phrase she used, "I will not be made a fool of." She did, steady hand, no flourish. I pocketed the slip. The chauffeur, Allan, came next. A fresh-faced man, earnest, frightened. I didn't do nothing, he blurted before I'd asked a word, always a sign of innocence or guilt, nothing between. He swore he'd been in the mews cleaning the motor between 2 and 3, with the wireless on loud enough for the cook to vouch. He claimed he knew of the revolver because Sir Alistair once showed it to him, after a drunken wanderer had rattled the door one night. So, everyone knew the gun, yet the household insists only Sir Alistair had access. A contradiction worth filing. When I stepped back into the hall, I felt the case close in tighter. Everyone repeated the same phrases. She was unhappy. It was suicide. We spared the family. When a household speaks with one voice, it is because someone is writing the script. This case had an author, all right. My job was to find who held the pen. Chapter 3, Candles and Keys. The inquest convened in a cramped paneled room that smelled of chalk dust and stale ink. The coroner presided like a man more concerned with order than truth. 12 jurors stared straight ahead, their eyes betraying the same thing I'd seen in many an inquiry, curiosity they were half ashamed to feel. Lady Margaret Finch gave her testimony with pale dignity, Sir Alistair with stiff correctness. Dr. Tempest declared promptly for suicide, his voice oiled with certainty. The housekeeper, Mrs. Bright, described her shock, while the chauffeur told his story with the blunt honesty of a working man. Miss Thompson, the secretary, spoke with precision and restraint. Each statement lined up neatly, too neatly. As I listened, I kept a tally in my head. Not of names, but of untruths. Some half-truths, some evasions, but all shaping the same false picture. After the inquest, in the street, a colleague asked me what I'd been counting. The false notes, I told him. 1. The revolver supposedly locked in Sir Alistair's desk, when we already know it wasn't so secure. 2. The embalming urged at once, a decision more convenient to certain reputations than to justice. 3. The letters, burned too quickly and too completely for my liking. 4. The polished banister and the soot, signs of a candle carried where no candle need be. And 5. The absence of any suicide note, remarkable, given the claim that she was neat and orderly in all things. We returned to number 17 with the pretext of re-examining the library. Mrs. Bright allowed it. I went straight to Sir Alistair's desk. I didn't touch the drawer, only studied the lock. A simple warded device, cheap, common, and child's play to open with a wire. Not the sort of lock a man relies upon for his most guarded possession. Which meant someone in the house already knew how little it was worth. Miss Thompson entered as I knelt near the hearth. "When you burned those letters," I asked suddenly, "what light did you use?" "The fog had come early," you said. "A candle," she admitted. "I'm sorry about the wax that spilled. I tried to clean it." There it was, the mark I'd seen on the hearthstone. Candles in the library when the house boasted electric light. A detail that whispered of more than letters. I asked her then, politely, to write for me the very phrase she had claimed Miss Grey had spoken, "I will not be made a fool of." She wrote it without hesitation, hand steady, practical. I tucked it away beside a charred scrap I'd salvaged from the grate earlier, one marked with violet ink and the beginning of letters, J.G. Miss Jane Grey's name, in another hand. Evidence that not all the burning had been hers. Later, I tested a thought at the basement stairs. I placed my hand along the banister as if shielding a candle flame from draft. The soot had marked exactly that spot. Someone had descended with light, discreetly, when electricity would have been easier. Why? Because a candle left no record in the household's memory, it could be carried in silence. Down in the wine store, I found something more. Ether. A common solvent, but also a convenient chemical for those who want to tidy away what the eye should have seen. By nightfall, I had reached one conclusion: this case was not about despair but arrangement. Jane Grey had not staged her death. Someone else had staged it for her. The household story was too rehearsed. The truth would lie with the one person who kept the keys, handled the papers, fetched the light, and polished away the stains while insisting she had nothing to do with them. Miss Thompson was at the center, whether she knew it or not. Chapter 4: The Letters in the Grate. The coroner, under pressure from the press and whispers of irregularity, agreed to my request for exhumation. The second post-mortem yielded what I had expected, and what I feared. The revolver wound at the right temple was genuine, but the bruising beneath the scalp told a different tale. Circulation had already slowed at the time of the shot. In plain terms, Jane Grey had been struck first, shot afterward. The embalming had concealed much, but not all. Enough remained to know this was no suicide. I said it aloud to my colleague that evening: she was killed, then posed. The gun was a stage prop. Someone arranged the scene. The real question was not how, but why, and who. The household's details kept circling back to those burned letters. At the grate in the library, I sifted ash with my pocket glass. Among the coal remnants I found what they thought destroyed, a fleck of charred paper, not wholly gone. On it, the curve of a J and the back of a G. Jane Grey. The ink was violet, different from her usual hand. Someone else had written at least part of it. I matched it against the slip I had earlier asked Miss Thompson to write. "I will not be made a fool of." Same firm script, same violet ink. That pen, her pen. In Miss Grey's room, sealed since the death, I found handkerchiefs faintly scented with a common violet perfume, not Lady Margaret's refined French essence. Miss Thompson again. The trail of small things was beginning to form a line. When I confronted her in the library, she sat behind her tidy piles of correspondence, arranging order as if the world could be managed into neat stacks. "Miss Thompson," I said, producing the fragment, "yesterday you burned letters. Today I have a piece that survived. It bears violet ink. The same as your pen." Her composure cracked. She admitted at last, Jane had written to Sir Alistair. She thought herself noticed, perhaps courted, perhaps misled. She begged him to be honest. Miss Thompson had persuaded her to burn the letter, had stood by as it went into the fire. And what of Sir Alistair? He had raged, she confessed, forbidding the matter be spoken of. He asked her, his secretary, to see that the girl was sensible. The word had a cold edge to it. I pressed further. She dropped her eyes. "I once cared for Sir Alistair myself," she said quietly. "Years ago. He never knew. I learned to content myself with duty, with accounts and order. But Miss Grey, she was young. She thought kindness meant more than it did. She was wrong." When we later confronted Sir Alistair in his study, he did not deny receiving a letter. He called it foolish, sentimental, beneath reply. Lydia, Miss Thompson, had burned it on his orders. His words were bitter, his face gray. You cannot know what it is to build a reputation brick by brick and have it torn down by whispers, he told me. Oh, I know reputations, I said. They crumble quicker than men imagine. Truth, though, truth endures. I left him with his ledgers and his anger. He was guilty of pride, of cowardice, of vanity. But murder was not his hand. He would have slammed a door, dictated an order, not carried a candle into a basement. No, the hand that held the candle, that arranged the scene, that polished away the soot, that hand belonged elsewhere. And it was trembling now. Chapter 5, The Night in the Basement. When evidence leaves gaps, I have found one tool never fails: reenactment. The mind may argue, but the body reveals. I obtained permission to conduct my test at number 17 after dark. The staff whispered that it was uncanny, but they obeyed. Lady Margaret sat pale and watchful. Sir Alistair absented himself at his club. At 10 o'clock I gathered them all, Mrs. Bright, Miss Thompson, young Allan the chauffeur, and Dr. Tempest, who arrived with an air of injured dignity. A constable stood by, heavy-eyed but steady. "We will repeat what must have happened," I said. "Miss Thompson, take this candle and descend the basement stairs as you did before." She hesitated, then complied, hand cupped over the flame. From the top I watched the shadow of her fingers fall across the banister, precisely where I had found soot. Proof enough that she had carried light that day when none was needed. I turned to Dr. Tempest. "Doctor, if a shot is fired into a body already lifeless, what blood do we expect?" He shifted uneasily. "Very little." "And embalming, within the hour, what does it do to the truth?" "It conceals it," he admitted, sweat glistening at his temples. Mrs. Bright confirmed she had polished the stair only after smudges had appeared. Not before. Not by routine. By reaction. Then I placed Allan at the cellar threshold. "Stand as if you came for coal, as you say you did. Tell me what you saw." He turned pale. "She was right there, by the stairs." I moved him a step, then another, until the chalk outline lay clear. "Here is where she was found. Not where you saw her first. Someone dragged her. 6 feet at least. Why? To stage her beside the trestle, revolver at hand." The constable muttered, "That's no suicide." I addressed the group. This crime was not wild. It was arranged, deliberate as a bookkeeper balancing ledgers. The revolver removed from Sir Alistair's desk with a wire or skeleton key. The candle carried to shield the act. The polish applied to erase. The embalming urged to finish the work. I produced a loop of wire, bent and simple, and opened the desk drawer lock in seconds. Not a fortress. A child could do it. Who here insisted only Sir Alistair had the key? All eyes turned toward Miss Thompson. She stood rigid, voice trembling. "If you mean me, Mr. Pinkerton, I am no thief." "No thief," I said quietly. "But practical. You handled papers, accounts, locks. You knew their weakness. On that day, you feared Jane Grey's letter was not the last. You descended with a candle to reason with her. There was struggle. She fell, struck her head. Dead or dying, you panicked. So you staged a suicide with Sir Alistair's revolver. You summoned Dr. Tempest, knowing he would prefer tidy endings. You asked for embalming. You arranged everything, as you always have. You did not mean to kill her. But you did." There was a silence that hollowed the room. Miss Thompson's hand moved to her throat. I only wished to prevent disgrace. For the child. For Lady Margaret. From the doorway came Lady Margaret's voice, steady as stone. Lydia, is it true? The secretary turned, face drained, eyes wide as if seeing judgment at last. I wanted to protect you, she whispered. That is all. Her words fell into stillness. The law would carry her next. My work was nearly done. But I could not escape the thought, this was not the act of malice, but of a woman who had tidied away truths too long, until one day she tried to tidy away death itself. Chapter 6, The Drawing Room and the Dawn. London looks different in the first light of morning. A city that breeds secrets and shadows can, for an hour, appear almost innocent. That morning, with the case in hand, I sat over a cup of strong coffee while the newspapers shouted headlines of scandal. They had little accuracy, but accuracy was never their trade. Lady Margaret telephoned. Her request was quiet, composed, that Miss Thompson be given time before arrest, to write to her sister. I told her I would see that the inspector showed consideration. What will the coroner rule? My associate asked. Homicide, I said. The embalming will be judged irregular, and Dr. Tempest's zeal will not escape mention. He chose propriety over truth, a professional weakness as dangerous as any crime. And Sir Alistair? He will not be charged, I answered. But the Times will punish him more effectively than the courts could. His reflection will finish the work. At noon, I returned to Ashdown Square. A constable stood guard at the door, the stoic kind of man whose presence reassures the public even as it warns them. Inside, Lady Margaret greeted me in the morning room. Miss Thompson has confessed, she said simply. She is with the inspector now. She paused, then added, I do not know whether to thank you or resent you. Part of me wishes the lie had endured, for my child. But lies rot the floorboards, Mr. Pinkerton. Better to stumble on truth than fall through deceit. You are brave, madam, I said. Not brave. Only tired, she replied. Then, after a pause, tell me, did my husband? Ask him, I advised. He will deny first. Then, if he can, he will admit enough. That is for you, not me. On the steps outside, I met Sir Alistair himself, hat in hand, face drawn and ravaged. He spoke before I could. Miss Thompson has confessed. The fault is mine. I built a world of order and efficiency. She followed it too well. I made her my instrument, and she killed a girl. You have more to say, Sir Alistair, I told him. But not to me. To your wife. He passed me without another word, walking inside like a man to confession. Across the street, I found Dr. Tempest lighting a cigarette with hands too steady for the fury in his face. You've ruined me, he spat. No, doctor, I said. I've handed you back a better reputation than you had. Next time, refuse. Let the coroner see first. You will be called inconvenient. But you will have done your duty. For the first time, his eyes softened. Perhaps he would learn. In the hall, Mrs. Bright polished a stretch of wood that had no need of it. I am sorry for Miss Thompson, she said. Always too good, too tidy. She cleaned up after everyone, until she tidied herself into ruin. I told her gently, basements are honest places, Mrs. Bright. The dirt collects there and admits it. People could learn from that. She smiled faintly. Will you have tea, sir? I declined. My work was done. As I stepped into the thin noon sunlight, I reflected, this had not been a grand crime of greed or conspiracy. It was smaller, more tragic. A life lost not through malice, but through the fatal instinct to polish away what should have been faced. The worst tragedies are always the small ones. There would be another house, another family, another set of keys kept too closely and lies polished too brightly. And when they came calling, I would be there. Chapter 7, Confessions and Consequences. By the following morning, the matter was no longer in my hands alone. Scotland Yard had taken custody of Miss Lydia Thompson. She did not resist. She walked out of number 17 Ashdown Square with the calm of a woman long used to being invisible, carrying a small satchel, spectacles steady upon her face. The crowd in the street whispered scandal. She did not look up. Her written confession was brief. She admitted to confronting Jane Grey in the basement with the revolver taken from Sir Alistair's desk. She swore her purpose had been persuasion, not violence. In her words, I sought only to frighten her into silence, for Lady Margaret's sake. But she resisted, and in the struggle she fell. I arranged it as suicide to protect the family. It was not the confession of a hardened criminal. It was the confession of a loyal servant who had mistaken control for duty. At the inquest, I was asked for my professional opinion. I kept to facts. Jane Grey had died not by her own hand, but from a blow sustained in struggle. The revolver was introduced after death, its placement deliberate. The embalming was urged too quickly and obscured evidence. The household's testimony was too rehearsed, too consistent, suggesting careful management of appearances. The jury returned a verdict of unlawful killing. Miss Thompson would face trial at the Old Bailey. Dr. Tempest endured sharp rebuke from the coroner for his zeal. His reputation in society would not recover easily, though his medical practice might. Sir Alistair Finch avoided indictment, but he did not avoid disgrace. Every newspaper hinted at impropriety, and though none could prove scandal, his name now carried the faint smell of it. For a man who prized his ledgers and his respectability, that was punishment enough. Lady Margaret bore herself with quiet fortitude. She wrote me later, I cannot decide whether Miss Thompson wronged me or protected me. Perhaps both. But I know this, lies corrode, and truth, however cruel, restores air to a suffocating house. It was a sentiment I agreed with. For my part, I closed my report with this. In Ashdown Square, the motive was not greed, nor jealousy, nor revenge. It was tidiness. A woman who had spent her life keeping order, in accounts, in letters, in reputations, believed she could also order death into silence. She learned too late that human lives cannot be balanced like ledgers, nor scandals polished away like soot on a stair. And with that, the case was finished. The law would take its course, and I would move on to the next household that mistook polish for truth. Chapter 8, The Final Reflection. With Miss Thompson remanded for trial, the Finch household stood in ruins. Not a ruin of stone and mortar, but of reputation, trust, and quiet illusions. The servants whispered of leaving, society whispered of scandal. Sir Alistair buried himself at his club, avoiding the gaze of neighbors who now saw weakness where once they had seen iron. Lady Margaret moved with dignity, but her eyes betrayed a weariness that no detective could remedy. Jane Grey, the young nurse companion, was lowered into the ground for a second and final time. There were few mourners outside the family staff. She had no wealth, no name, no influence. Her death might easily have been written off as a suicide, and forgotten, had the truth not been pried out from under polish and soot. I have seen it too often, the poor, the powerless, the servants, their deaths dismissed as accidents or frailty when in fact they are the first casualties of other people's pride. Miss Thompson's future lay with the courts. Whether they would see in her act the full crime of murder or the lesser charge of manslaughter was not for me to decide. What I knew, and wrote plainly, was this: she had not planned to kill. She had planned to arrange. To tidy away what threatened her mistress's peace and her master's reputation. But death does not submit to tidying. Once loosed, it stands in the open, and no polish can disguise it. Dr. Tempest continued his practice, though diminished. His sin was not violence but vanity. He had placed decorum above duty, reputation above truth. In my report I noted that men of his kind do not always learn, but sometimes disgrace forces them into a better honesty than admiration ever did. Sir Alistair suffered the punishment suited to his crime, not prison, but exposure. He had treated affection as nuisance, loyalty as instrument, reputation as idol. He did not kill Jane Grey, but he helped create the circumstances that made her death possible. That truth would follow him through every corridor of his career. And Lady Margaret, she survived, though altered. She saw the woman who had served her faithfully for years transformed into her household's undoing. She saw that loyalty, when twisted, can become more dangerous than betrayal. Her letter to me said it best: it is better to live with scandal than with lies. Scandal wounds, lies rot. In the end, I closed the file with this reflection. The tragedy of Ashdown Square was not plotted in malice but in fear. Fear of gossip, fear of disorder, fear of the truth. It is a common thread in many cases I have worked. People imagine crime always springs from greed or hatred. Yet often it comes from nothing grander than the wish to keep appearances neat. But lives are not ledgers, and death cannot be balanced like accounts. With that, I sealed the report, marked the case complete, and turned to the next call. For in London, as in every city I have known, there is always another house polishing where no polish is needed, and another secret waiting to be uncovered.